I'm delighted to be here with this really distinguished panel of exceptional women. My own personal interest stems from, having been in technology for a while now, and as the former chief executive of the UK Space Agency, I saw, what a gap we have, gender divide in the space sector. And I think that getting more women and girls into STEM is absolutely critical for society as well as for the economy of the world. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists, Noella Coursaris Musunka, who is the founder and CEO of the Malaika Foundation, Kirthiga Reddy, who's an investment partner at the Softbank Vision Fund, and Tara Chklovski, and Tara, please correct me if I've mispronounced that, CEO and founder of Technovation. And without further ado, I would like to jump in and just ask all of these impressive women, why STEM? Why STEM? Why is it important to get more women and girls into STEM? Shall I start with Noella?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here among you. Why STEM? STEM, I think, is really an approach of learning and developments that focus on science, technology, mathematics, and engineering. It puts on emphasizing on developing digital and analytic skills, and is really important for the leadership, preparing individual for the 21st century. But for me, it comes from a different background, because I set up 14 years ago Malaika Foundation in a village where there's no water, where there's no electricity, and where I had the dream to really build a leadership school for girls and investing a lot in STEM. So before arriving even to emphasizing on education for the STEM, you needed to think to build the school, you needed to build the well, you needed to put the green energy, you needed to have the internet, and then the running program in terms of technology, because there's lack of infrastructure in the village, there is no water and no electricity. So it's really creating the girls to be leaders and to really be ready for the 21st century with STEM programs, but it's a long journey with a lot of challenges to make them ready. But when I see them, it's fantastic, because they learn from coding, from scratch, from pages. They did with a 3D printer, they did some mask shield more than 2,000 mask shield. We distributed over 60 hospitals, and they're still growing and have dream of being tech engineer or astronaut. And in 2 years, there will be the first cohort of girls leaving Malaika school, because they arrive at 5 years old until 18 years old. So STEM is at the forefront of our education at Malaika.
That's fantastic. Tara, I know you've also done lots of work with education. Can you talk about why STEM?
STEM, because those are the highest paying jobs in the world. Everybody, we are connecting now through COVID because of technology. Just fundamental progress, well-being for all of us, for humans, for health access, for education access, for strong work. STEM underlies all of that, and the biggest problem is that women are highly underrepresented in tech. Less than 10% of women worldwide are in the jobs that are creating the technologies that we use every day. And so that needs to change, because COVID, of course, has set us back even more, because women a lot of them were not able to work from home, because guess what? Like, to be able to work from home, you have to be in a career that is somewhat supported by STEM. So just from the very sort of point of view of basic human development, basic human rights, STEM is one of the strongest levers that we have to be able to uplift and ensure that girls and women have the access, the opportunities to thrive.
Fantastic. And Kirthiga.
Yeah. As we were preparing for this session, Tara asked me, is this personal? Is this professional? And the answer is as is usually the case, it's both. I am an engineer by background, started my career in the high-performance computing space, then saw the mobile shift as a product leader, then saw the social shift as a business leader. I was employee number 1 for Facebook in India, built our business there before my current role at Softbank. And in many of those conversations, very used to being the only woman in the room. And as the legendary RPG says, Associate Justice of the US Supreme Court, women belong in every room that decisions are made. If I then think about the professional side, at the Vision Fund is a 100 billion plus fund. Our thesis is that AI and data is changing every industry as we know it, whether it's enterprise, health tech, education, consumer, fintech, the list goes on. Now, as we think about people designing these systems, it is so important that the people designing these systems are representative of the world. It is known that biases can seep into these systems unconsciously, and there is a huge need for diverse people to be designing these systems so that products and systems are human-centered, ethical, innovative. And if you look at the numbers don't match. Even in the largest companies, Facebook, Google, it's about 10-15% of AI engineers are women. So we really need more girls, more women through every part of this system, from the educational system, the graduate, the undergraduate, entry level, all the way to the very top.
We will explore the question about biases again further in this panel. It's such an important question. So there's a real theme here about social and economic inclusion, about jobs. I know Korn Ferry had a recent report saying there were already 85 million tech vacancies around the world. We need to get women into those jobs. And the World Economic Forum, has projected that 9 out of 10 jobs in the future are going to require digital skills. Where are girls and women going to develop those digital skills? Noella, I'd really like to hear more about what Malaika is doing and how you can achieve STEM education and STEM engagement in environments where the basic daily needs may not be easily met. And, we know that digital equity has been identified by the UN as sort of critical to achieving UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I think, as Tara also pointed out, to post-pandemic recovery, how do we close the digital divide when you're working in environments where there are so many barriers, in a sense? So I'd really like to hear more about your experience there, Noella.
Yeah, like I was saying, when I talk about Malaika School, I talk about all over the school that are working in underprivileged areas. We saw when the closing of the school happened, most of the school, they were not central where the internet and everything going well. For instance, at Malaika, the girls cannot have their tablets, they cannot have laptop at their home because they don't have electricity, and there's the problem of security. So we needed to bring the homework manually in certain point in the village. So for me, I really push governments, local NGO, international NGO, that we really need to shift their focus strongly, emphasizing on STEM through the curriculum, make sure the infrastructure and the internet is well surrounded, make sure too that our students are prepared. But when we see our students at a school, they're facing malnutrition too. We're facing more than 12 million of girls after COVID-19 won't go back to school. So how can we help with the digital gap? How we can help these girls to go back to school? Because if we don't help them to go back to school and be enrolled for STEM program and digitalization, they will be married at a younger age, they will get pregnant. And we saw that our students, to enroll them when the school back open, 98% of our girls came back to our programs. But because we have a big emphasis with our community center, because we built a community center where we emphasize a lot of education on the youth, on the parents, and how it's important the ripple effect in their family and how their family come. But we're seeing at our community center, some parents, they never knew to read and write. They come to learn to read and write manually. And then we put them in the digital world where they're starting to use a computer, Word, Excel, where they're starting to use to make their CV. At the school, of course, we are more advanced, where the girls arrive at 6 years old, where we're teaching the VPN, Blocky, Scratch, Keynote, and we teach robotic. But we need to, I think, in schools all over the world, we need to really reimagine our education. It cannot be only, I see my son sometimes have to read and memorize so many pages of history and geography, all of that. I do think that this young generation will become actor of the economy, of the drive economical, and they need to be working and adapt with what we're living now. We all at home, we're all using Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, and that's gonna keep continuing. The digital and the old-fashioned ways will work together.
Really interesting what you say about engaging the whole community, engaging parents, and I suppose all of the influencers in those girls' lives. I just want to pause for 1 second and say to the audience, please feel free to put questions into the panel while we're talking. There is no need to wait for the Q&A at the end. You may have more interesting questions to pose than I do. So by all means, start feeding your questions in now. Tara.
And Katherine,
yes.
actually, if I might just jump in and add to what Noella said, I talk a lot about how COVID has really accelerated digitization across industries. But when I also am very consciously aware that it has also increased the gap between the digital have and the have-nots. I'm on the advisory board of Teach for India US, and Teach for India serves over 30,000 of the most economically disadvantaged students. And when COVID hit, as Noella mentioned, again, there are challenges at a very basic level, and then the need for devices. And we are talking about an entire generation being impacted. Like, there's estimates that tens of millions of students may drop off of the workforce. They drop off of the education system because of COVID. And it is truly a generational impact that everyone has to rally around to try to avoid.
Absolutely. Yeah, everybody says that the pandemic has accelerated the move towards, digital in our everyday lives. But there's still 3.7 billion people who do not have access to the internet. But Tara, I'd really like to pass the floor to you because I know that you have a lot of expertise in the subject of whether is internet access enough, and how you have to be involved, in a much wider scope of action.
Yeah, thank you, Katherine, and I appreciate the rocket on your bookshelf. Yeah, I think so I run Technovation. We've been running for 15 years. Our mission is to empower underserved communities to tackle problems that they face with the most powerful tools that society has to offer them. And so 10 years ago, it was mobile technologies. Now it's AI. And one of the, some of the key things that we have found is that, and we primarily focus on girls. So we've reached roughly 250,000 participants across more than 120 countries. And we have about 100,000 young women alumni now who have gone through our program, which is a 100-hour program. It's a technology entrepreneurship program where you have to find a problem that aligns with the SDGs, actually create a mobile app or an AI prototype, create a business plan, and then launch that product into the market and get users. So it can be a nonprofit or a for-profit. So it's a very, very rigorous experience. And it is life-changing because anybody who has launched a business never sort of goes back. It really cements your your confidence, your way of thinking. And what we found was that that just having internet access is not enough, because guess what? Like, most of us know that we need to exercise. It's the right thing to do, but 80% of us don't exercise. So even if you're given access to internet, it doesn't mean that you're going to spend all your time on Coursera or learning some new skill. What you're going to do is you're going to spend most of your time on YouTube playing video games or watching Netflix. And so the key piece to build it, people love to talk about access to internet. or bringing a laptop. And there are many examples of failed projects. The one laptop per child is one big example, where the key piece is the infrastructure, what Noella was talking about, and more importantly, people infrastructure, social capital. And so one of the key things that we learned was that if a girl is struggling, it's because her family is struggling too. And so it's really important to have a holistic viewpoint where you need to have exposure to role models. You need to make sure that the curriculum is relevant, it's exciting, it's not boring. You need to have all the cheerleaders in the girls' support system, mentors, parents on board, peers on board. And lastly, you need to make this super fun, right? Because who's going to do things that are just hard and not and so you need to have adrenaline built into the model, with competitions and a lot of sort of community support. So when you get all four things right, that's when you really have a long-lasting change in mindset. Because guess what? Just teaching girls how to code is not going to give them the skills to lead change as they enter the workforce, because there's no country in the world that has gender equality. And so they have to be really driving uphill, and you need to give them the skills by which they can do so over a long period of time. So my recommendation to people is to not stop thinking about just access, but think about how do you build a network of people and social capital around the communities that need them.
I'm just interested to hear your thoughts and Noella's as well about support for teachers as part of that social capital. My own charity, Primary Space, is really targeting primary school teachers, try and build their STEM awareness and STEM confidence, because they are such big influencers on young girls. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about that. And then there's a related question from the audience about the national curriculum, which is the way we describe it in the UK. Have we got the curriculum in schools right? Do we need to rethink that? I'll throw it back to you first, Tara.
My response is, guess what? We spend a very small amount of time in the formal school system. So don't burden the poor teachers. They're already doing too much. Don't try to say, okay, you need to do the basic things and this and this and this and this. I think broaden the conversation, broaden the goals. It's very obvious. It's very, very simple to just target the time children spend in school, but actually make it easier for families to learn together. Because guess what? Even though maybe you're 40 or 50, you may actually need to reinvent your career. With AI, you may need to learn how to tackle new products, software, and especially women, especially mothers. So I think that age is no barrier, and really lifelong learning should be the new mindset that we talk about, and de-emphasize the pressure on the teachers. The teachers are already doing a great job. And I think that curriculum is, again, a very easy target because it's so tangible. But I just think that there has to be a more community-based approach where parents play a role, your grandparents play a role, your mentors from industry play a role. And then, yes, the teachers are the pillar, but don't break that pillar.
Noella, what are your views on that? There's really interesting insights, Tara. Thanks for sharing them.
Mentors is really key, and role models. For instance, we have a lot of tech saver that give a Zoom once a week to a student on different programming, either the STEM, either the math, the physics, or the computing and coding. And they are male or they are female too. I do believe we were all teachers. I have a daughter, she's 7 years old, and a boy 10 years. So the last 1 year, we all been homeschool at home, and I have to salute the teachers. I do think the curriculum is really great, what they have at school, either here or in Africa, but it needs an upgrade. It needs an upgrade. And the teachers need constantly to be recycling. We saw the first lockdown was chaotic, how we were all going to do the class online. The second lockdown was much better because schools adapt themselves and teachers too. But it's very important at the base to give a very strong training to the teachers, because kids now, young generation, are fast. And I see my son, he uses Google Chrome, he uses Mac, he uses PC, he uses all these things that he uses Alexa on my phone, and he's the one setting up everything about at home. But I cannot understand most of the things. But what is really important too in our curriculum, we're seeing in Africa we're not enough digitalized, but we're seeing here there's sometimes too much. And I do think the sport is important, the music, the arts, to make them think out of the box, to have social skills. We see a lot of kids when they went back after a lot of lockdowns, they were not confident to play with their friends. They didn't have these social skills. And we cannot lose them because we need still to be human. The kids need still to play outside with kids. They need to have a relationship with a real teacher, have a conversation, have a paper and write and read. I push my kids every day to read at least 20 minutes before bedtime. And it's a lot of things where we need, I think, to find the right balance in everything that we're doing.
And that's coming back to that point about how important the humans are in the technology loop. But I'd like to just pick up a little bit about that role of entrepreneurship and that role of business in inspiring more women and girls into STEM. Kirthiga, can you share some thoughts on that?
Sure, Katherine. And as Noella and Tara were talking, what was flashing through my mind was the amount of investment that's gone into EdTech and how EdTech really has been one of the leading sectors helping students, teachers through this past year. And that change is here and it's here to stay. There are also several examples of how technology is actually being used to level the playing field, if you may, for girls and women in STEM. One example that comes to mind is a recent investment that we made in a company called Eightfold.ai. They are an AI-first talent intelligence platform. They help with things like blinding of resumes so that you don't see the gender or have inferences about race, etc., when you're looking at a resume and you're assessing them solely based on their accomplishments. It also helps surface the right roles for you. And what we're finding is, there's research that shows that men look at roles, and if you meet 60% of the criteria, they think that's a perfect match. Whereas women look at a role and want to see 100% match. So what the platform is able to do is to help take away some of those biases and is actually able to surface roles to women and diverse candidates that says, oh, you're a great fit for this role. And we are seeing some of their companies tell us that they're seeing an over 50% increase in diverse applicants because of this kind of capability. So that's something that I think a lot about, is how can technology actually be used to address these biases and help with diversity and inclusion. And the last thing that I'll mention is, again, building on that importance of community. Despite all the focus on diversity, the amount of funding for women founders actually decreased in 2020, which is, again, heartbreaking, right? So one of the things that the Vision Fund has done is launched an accelerator program called Emerge. So this is a program for brilliant companies by underrepresented founders. We had a US edition last year, just launched it in the UK. Applications are open till July 7th. So if you or anyone that you know, anyone in the audience qualifies, we'd love for you to apply. This is something that we all have to do together.
That's fantastic. There's an invitation to audience members, and I'll reiterate the invitation to put your questions into the panel as we go along. I think I would be very interested to hear, we know that there's been impacts across the economy from the pandemic. You mentioned that funding for female founders has decreased. Are there other consequences from last year that we're going to need to get through before we can accelerate and move forward again? Noella, did you have any impacts from last year that you're needing to work through in this year?
Yes, so we're seeing that where we're really working on at Malaika is really creating more stronger data and about all the impact we have. We're seeing, unfortunately, a decrease on our donation because of the COVID-19. They're saying that 4 out of 10 charities will not survive the next few years. It's kind of really scary. But as a charity, you need to adapt yourself, to reinvent yourself. So we've been creating some webinar. We had a stronger social presence. We ask all our donor supporters to put more about our work into the social media and into LinkedIn and all these platforms that we have. But we're seeing an increase too of young generation that want to donate their time and their skills. And that's the reason, even with all this lockdown, we were able to train our teachers and we were able to strengthen all the STEM program at Malaika. And we're seeing more tech companies want to be involved in increasing everything that we have set up at Malaika. But it's tough. It's really a tough moment because, for instance, Congo, we were going very well, and now the government announced yesterday that it will be a third wave of COVID restriction. So when there's a third wave, what is very hard for charities like us, it's we depend a lot on people coming to visit us and volunteering, and they're becoming ambassador for us. But now, since 2 years, nobody can travel. So you have less impact and you have less visibility. And it really impacts the charities, but I do think it impacts a lot of business, like tourism and etc. And Africa is a young, it's a young population, and they're gonna thrive. But what is really great, it's this young generation actually work. They don't have access to a lot of laptop. Everything that they're doing is through their phone. So what they need on the phone is the data. But to have data, you need money. You need so you need to give them. We need to work on employability for the youth in Africa, because then there will be a huge factor for the economical growth in Africa. But if they don't have access to internet and data and that will give them the platform to be entrepreneur, that will really bring them back.
And of course, economic growth in Africa is good for the rest of the world as well. Tara, how have you...
Like a country like Congo, a lot of industry depends on the minerals that we have. For the green energy, you have lithium, coltan, cobalt, and the same thing for all the laptops. So Congo is a very important part, and so many other countries in Africa play a huge part on the tech development.
And Tara, what about you, your experiences of the last year?
I mean, it was hard for sure, but I think because many girls were not able to access internet, but even those who were, I think, and this is true of even highly educated, affluent women in the US, guess who sort of shouldered the burden of housework and cleaning? It was the girls and women. And so I think even women scientists in the US, their publishing rate decreased significantly because guess what? They were looking after the children. They were taking care of all the household work, the cooking and the cleaning. And so in lower income communities, the girls shouldered the majority of that, and their education suffered. So even though they may have had access to internet, they did not have time to participate in programs like Technovation. But this is where our community of mentors and chapter ambassadors and volunteers really stepped in. Like Noella was saying, local NGOs. So we've reached roughly 40,000 incredible employees from different corporations worldwide. And they took the effort to connect with girls, talk to their parents, make sure that they were having access to and time to be able to learn. But we work across 36 countries in Africa. And as Noella was saying, like the increase in child marriage, abuse really was a big sort of heartbreaking problem. And we saw many girls in Kenya, many teams across in Uganda, Nigeria, making apps that basically were supporting girls who have been abused during COVID, may become teenage mothers, and now do not have the ability to go to school anymore. And so they're creating apps to actually support these girls to learn about entrepreneurship and to continue their studies. So that was a very tough thing that we are seeing. And we, of course, we work with UNESCO, and we are seeing some of these statistics come through now. And going forward, I just think that the really positive thing, as Kirthiga was saying, is that EdTech enables schools and learning to continue. But I would just emphasize that now we are not so scared of virtual mentoring and virtual connections. And that is something we really need to lean into as we try to build back from COVID.
It's so important that about the disproportionate impacts on women from the effects of the pandemic. And now world leaders are all talking about, building back better. And I'd really, think that it would be great to talk a bit now with the panel about, how do we build back better? How do we, move from talking to action? I think Parveen was saying, it's an important dialogue, a discussion that's been going on for a long time. And why are we still talking about it? Very interested in your suggestions for action, in particular actions to tackle those biases that still persist out there, that, it's the woman who will pick up and deal with all the caring responsibilities, at the expense maybe of her career or her education in a crisis. And I do want to say to the audience, we've got less than 10 minutes left. So please start typing in your questions now, because I know that we would like to have a chance to address them. But let's talk about that, biases that lead to both disproportionate impacts and also ineffective programs that may not really be making the change that we want to see happen. Kirthiga, should we start with you?
Yeah, a lot of what we're discussing to Praveen's setup existed before COVID, got accentuated in COVID, and have to be tackled head on post-COVID. And to me, it is at a personal level, a professional level, at a personal level, even within our homes. I was telling Katherine the story about how my daughter, second birthday, she wanted a Superman birthday cake. Third birthday, she wanted a Spider-Man. The next one, she wanted a Batman. And each time the planners asked me if it was a boy. But what was striking to me was in that when she wanted a Batman cake, she asked me, "Oh, Mom, should I also get a Barbie cake? Because are my friends going to laugh at me?" Right? So it is that early. It was striking to me that it's that early that people are picking up cues in society. So one, as an individual, what are we telling our children, our nephews, our nieces about what is the societal norm, and really encouraging them towards careers in STEM for all of the reasons that we spoke about. If you think then about the professional world, and you think about the drop-offs that happen, especially during life changes, having children, parents getting older, what is it that companies are doing to support them, and what are the government policies to support them? When I had my first child, California had a 6-week maternity policy, 6 weeks, right? 6 weeks. With the help of my mom, I was back again in 6 weeks. And sometimes I look at, again, the changes to maternity policy now, and my girls are now 18 and 15, but I say, maybe I should have a child just to take advantage of some of these maternity policies in here. But more seriously, right, what are we doing in the workforce to support women and diverse population through those childbearing ages? And the last pillar for me is the use of technology. How is it, like examples like Eightfold.ai, like the example that I gave of the accelerator program, what can we do? Even as I think of what we're doing at Softbank Vision Fund, we have taken steps, but we all need to take bigger strides.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask both Noella and Tara just to say a few words about that issue of tackling biases. And then we have had a question from the audience, so I want to make sure we have time to address that. Noella, let's hear your thoughts on that.
So what exactly was the question you want?
About tackling biases, about action. What can we do to tackle biases?
For me, coming from my background, is really keep investing in technology, really helping charities, helping schools, helping education that are not that don't have access. Is really to finding a way to provide a laptop for schools and children that are in need in our world, but underprivileged world too. Is how to invest more into. We have a lot of refugees worldwide, and they don't have access to basic education or digital education. And that's one thing for me that I really want to see in the coming years, is how we invest education and tech in education for refugees and for displaced people, because they cannot be behind. And the same thing for education worldwide. But we need funds. We need to have investors that really think and out of the box, what will be their agenda, how they will give some money for the tech industry, for the growth, for education. We want to see more funds coming up.
And Tara, your thoughts on tackling biases?
I think it starts at the individual level, goes all the way up. I think the thing to do, of course, is to support nonprofits and to work with them. And I also understand that's the role of the government. And in many cases, governments are not doing that, or not fast enough. And that's where philanthropy comes in, and that's where the corporate sector comes in. But as Kirthiga was saying, I think it's not just enough to work, of course, in the primary K through 12, but it's incredibly important to provide the continuum of support as young women continue to progress in their careers. I know that, like in India is an interesting example where I was in a class of physics undergrads. There were more women than men, and girls are encouraged to go into electrical engineering, computer science, but you don't see women in the leadership position. So I think Kirthiga is an incredible pioneer in that space, because the social norms are so strong against women. And the only way to change that is to provide a continuum of support for young women throughout their career. One example from the Reboot Representation Report in the US is that 45% of funding that goes towards gender equality programs goes towards the K through 12 space, and only 3% goes towards college age and above. And that's kind of indicative, right? That's why when we complain there are not enough women in the tech force, it's because we're not providing support every step of the way. A lot of our alumna who are college age and workforce 30% of them say that people give them very negative messages that you shouldn't be tackling big problems. You should not, you will never succeed. And that needs to change.
Thanks, Tara. So we have time just to have quick response to a question from the audience. The question is, what real steps can businesses take to encourage more women to apply and stay in technical roles so that there are more visible role models for girls to aspire to? Kirthiga, I'll start with you because you're deeply embedded in the business community.
Yeah. Have a real effort in sourcing diverse candidates, think outside the box in terms of roles. Softbank created a venture partner role, and I was the first female investing partner for Softbank Vision Fund. Of course, I'm the first, but not the last. We have multiple diverse partners on the investing side now. So really make it a priority to have a broader pipeline, think outside the box in terms of the roles, the talents, the skills that are needed, and provide them with that ongoing community and support to help them every step of the way, both through community, informal networks, as well as programmatic efforts. Maybe I'll just give you one quick anecdote back from the Facebook days. In our performance review tools, something that Tara said reminded me, we used to have tips. If you're using the word aggressive for a woman, would you describe a man in the same way for the same situation, right? So they were using tools and technology in the day-to-day to help make sure that we are providing a level playing field.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I feel that we are running out of information, time. It's such an interesting topic. We could talk about this all evening where I am, all morning where you are. What I'm drawing from this conversation is that practical actions that need to be taken are to invest in education, invest in programs that reach beyond just the schools and out into communities. That mentors and role models are very important and should be encouraged and supported, and that you can use technology as a tool, as a force for good, to try and tackle some of the unconscious biases that stand in the way of keeping more women in STEM as they go through their education, through their careers. And with that, I just want to say a big thanks to all three of you. Incredible insights that you've shared. I wish I had 2 hours to listen to you, and I will hand the floor back to Parveen.